Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
So today we're going to talk about John Edward Robinson. He was a career criminal. He was a con man, an embezzler, a kidnapper. He committed several acts of forgery, more than we probably even will get to today. He's a murderer and also a rapist. He went by the alias of John Osborne. He also went by the nickname the Slave Master.
Like he dubbed himself those names?
Yes. So he's known to be the internet's first serial killer. Yes. And in the chat rooms, he would name himself, you know how back when the internet was first a thing in chat rooms, he would name himself the Slave Master. And that was the name that he used in the different chat rooms that he trolled looking for his victims. So anywho, let's dive on into this one. So John was born on December 27th, 1943 in Illinois. He was the third of 5 children. So middle child syndrome here. Hey, I know somebody else that's a third child.
I had to think if it was or not.
It 100% is you. I see we're not firing on all cylinders today. Have you had your caffeine?
No, I was just like, is that me? I feel like it's me. Like, I didn't want to be like me. And then you're like, no, Claire, this is another case we've been discussing. Way to make it about yourself.
So John's father was an alcoholic, and he worked for Western Electric as a machinist. And his mother was a very strict disciplinarian person who, like in a lot of the other cases that we've talked about, she's on what I would consider the abusive side to her children. She was extra strict on her kids, maybe because she was unhappy with her marriage. Who the hell knows? Some reports say that his mother abused just him, which, yeah. His mother blamed him for the death of his younger brother. So when John's baby brother was an infant, he became sick and eventually died. I'm not sure what he died of. It just says that he was sick. But John adored his baby brother, and you know, he's like that little kid that just loved having the little baby brother. And when the baby died, John was shattered. And then his mother was telling him that it was his fault that the baby got sick and died in the first place. Mind you, he was only like 4 years old at the time. So really messed up.
Well, did he get the baby sick?
It doesn't say what the baby was sick from, but I feel like if it was something serious enough to kill an infant, that if John wasn't sick, then it's probably not something that he was able to give his brother. Like maybe the baby was born sickly. I have no idea, but sad. So beginning around 5 years old, his mother would beat him several times a week. She would threaten to kill him. She would tell John that she wished he was never born or wished that he was dead. And as John got older, the abuse towards him escalated. He would be beaten until he was unconscious or bedridden because he was so badly bruised and battered that he just couldn't get out of bed. And then she would also lock him in a room and keep him isolated from the rest of his family, which that's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
John was later diagnosed with PTSD due to the abuse from his mother. We're going to skip over his crimes and go with his diagnosis for a second, and then we'll backtrack. But aside from the PTSD, John appeared to show symptoms of dissociative and mood disorders with bouts of psychosis and extreme mood fluctuations. They also said he suffered from flat affect and episodes of mania. So according to Dr. Google, because Claire, I'm not a doctor. Dissociative disorder is a disconnection or a lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. And then, so basically, people escape their realities and they have like involuntary and unhealthy ways of dealing with daily life. Like they can't just function normally. And then psychosis is brought on by physical illness or injury. I thought that was kind of interesting. I never knew that psychosis was from illness, was brought on by illness or injury. So maybe the beatings from his mom created his psychosis, but it's where you suffer from hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thoughts. And then flat affect, it's seen in schizophrenia, depression, and autism. It means when somebody has no or low emotion, like on their face, like no frown, no smile, just flat.
Checked out.
Yeah. Or no emotions or low verbal. They're just, yeah, like they're checked out. Like they avoid eye contact when they speak. It's monotone. And then mania, sudden or extreme excitement, or euphoria, delusions, or like overreacting to stuff. So those are all that's his mental state. Okay. Now we're going to get on to John's life, how he is, how he got to be, his timeline. Because realistically, this case was such a mess that it is a timeline. So in 1955, John was about 12 years old. He joined the Boy Scouts. In 1957, he was 13 and he was accepted to the Quigley Preparatory School. And that was a 5-year program for young men who planned to become priests as adults.
And then it goes horribly wrong.
It does. November 1957, he was 13 years old. He became an Eagle Scout, and they said that he was due to become an elite future leader. By the middle of November, same year, the group of about 100 Boy Scouts or Eagle Scouts traveled to London, from the US to London. I feel like that was a very expensive Boy Scout trip, to go sing for the Queen of England. And afterwards, John went backstage and received a kiss on the head from Judy Garland, which made him turn into a pompous ass because he just got kissed by the woman that played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. He also sang at Sunday school, Holy Name Cathedral. Meanwhile, at the Quigley Preparatory School, he was failing and can't talk today. Jeez. So
it's because we didn't do your mouth warm up, although that sounds really fucking weird.
Yes, it does. Okay, so at the preparatory school, he was failing. He was he had discipline issues. He got into both verbal and physical fights with his classmates and spent a lot of time in detention. And by the end of his freshman year, he quit. Like he dropped out. And I actually Googled it. I couldn't find whether or not he graduated from high school, because you figure by 1957, he's 13, 14 years old. And then he drops out of the prep school. But then in 1961, so about 4 years later, that puts him at about 17 years old. He enrolled in the Morton Junior College in Illinois to become a medical radiographer. So I looked that up also. That's basically like an X-ray tech.
What year was this?
This is like 1961. 50. So he's about 17 years old and he's enrolled in the junior college. In 1964, he was 21. He met a woman named Nancy Jo Lynch, and they moved to Kansas City, Missouri, and they got married. And while somewhere around the same time that he met Nancy, he got a job as an X-ray tech at a children's hospital in Kansas because he forged his credentials. He dropped out of the Morton Junior College after only 2 years.
That's kind of impressive. So clearly he's either just really good at bullshitting or he knew his stuff.
So there's literally a timeline, and I have every year almost of this man's life where he committed some sort of act of like being a con man or like the forgery and just and eventually he escalates. But a lot of his stuff started off as just white collar crime. And it's just kind of crazy that he was able to, granted, it was the 60s and things weren't quite like they are now, but he was able to forge documents to get like, so in order to get a degree as a radiographer, you have to have a master's. It takes 3 or 4 years full time in school or 6 years part time. And he quit after 2. So he wasn't even halfway, like he maybe was halfway there and he just quit. Nancy Jo and John end up having 4 kids together. Their first son, John Jr., was born in 1965. So John cheated on Nancy Jo a lot, and she knew about it. Like, she knew that he was not faithful to her, and the few times that she tried to speak up, he would beat the living crap out of her. So she learned to just sit back and watch her husband cheat on her, and there wasn't anything she felt like she could do about it, which is sad.
Yeah.
In 1966, so a year after their son was born, John forges his credentials and gets a job at a medical practice because he was fired from the hospital for being incompetent.
Well, gee. I think the other person who hired him without verifying his credentials should also have been fired for incompetency.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair, especially 'cause the hospital. Like, do you know how many kids could have
Died.
gone undiagnosed or misdiagnosed because he didn't do his job correctly? So after he was fired, he forges his credentials and forges letters of recommendations from
Well,
Morton Junior College and the Children's Hospital and ends up getting hired at a private practice by Dr. Wallace Graham. He was hired once again to be an x-ray tech, and he's ended up stealing from Dr. Graham. However, while he was working there, he engaged in sexual acts with both the staff and Dr. Graham's patients. And then he would brag to Dr. Graham's 15-year-old son about his double life and all his sexual liaisons. And that he would tell Dr. Graham's son that he liked to go to a club that male transvestites went to. Just at this point,
that's a random fact.
yeah, it's just kind of letting you know
He's
where
open
this guy
to any
fits in.
options.
Well, he's 22. He's between the ages 22 and 24 at this point, and he's telling this stuff to a 15-year-old boy. Not only is he telling it to a 15-year-old boy, but he's telling it to his boss's 15-year-old son. Like,
Do you think it was one of those because he didn't think anybody would believe him anyway?
yeah. Well, a year later in 1969, John was arrested for embezzling $33,000 from Dr. Graham's office. So John ends up getting 3 years probation for stealing the $33,000, which
That's it? He didn't have
that's
to give it back? No restitution?
I don't know. It doesn't say, but
What do you do with the money?
I don't know. Lived off of it.
Hmm.
So in 1970, or same year that he was arrested for the 33,000 theft, he got a job working for Mobil Oil Corp. And then a year later, in 1970, when he was 26 years old, he was arrested again for stealing 6,200 stamps from Mobil Oil Corp. And he made a deal with the court to pay restitution, and the charges were dropped to a misdemeanor. I don't know what that means, 6,200 stamps, but I'm thinking of postage stamps, but I don't know if it's something else. Anywho, he ends up violating his probation for the $33,000 embezzlement by moving back to Chicago, Illinois without permission. In Chicago, John is employed by R.B. Jones Company. It's an insurance salesman. And then in 1971, so a year after he just got arrested for stealing from Mobil Oil Corp, so a year later, he's arrested again for embezzling money from R.B. Jones. This time it was only $5,586.36. He was ordered to return to Kansas, where his probation was. Charges were dropped as long as he paid restitution, and his 3-year probation was extended.
I'm concerned how light of sentences he's been getting. It seems
So far,
to be
right?
a path that's followed, that these people just trickle on through, not learning a lesson.
Like, his first official arrest was in 1969, and then again in 1970, and now again in 1971, and he's just getting a slap on the wrist. Like, it's very frustrating, especially because the way this case gets crazy. So in 1971, Nancy gives birth to their fraternal twins, Christopher and Christine. I forgot to mention in 1967, so when he was working at Dr. Graham's office, Nancy gave birth to their second child, a daughter named Kimberly. And now in 1971, she gives birth to twins, Christopher and Christine. And then they decide to move to a bigger house in Missouri. And now that he's obviously unemployed because he just got arrested again for stealing from the insurance company, he decides to start his own medical consulting business called Professional Services Association Incorporated.
It's a mouthful.
Right. Well, it ends up going by PSA. But in 1975, his probation was extended again with new charges of mail fraud and security fraud because of his fake professional medical consulting business. He pleads no contest to the charges of interstate securities fraud and was fined $2,500, and his probation was extended again for another 3 years. So he again does not serve a day in jail. In his spare time, because he's a busy boy, they move again. He becomes a scoutmaster, a baseball coach, and a Sunday school teacher, which I question the Sunday school teacher. Like, I don't know anything about becoming a Sunday school teacher. However, you would think that they would have a certain criteria for these people. And he's been arrested many, many times at this point for being dishonest and cheats on his wife. So I don't know. Anywho, in 1977, he was added to the board of directors for a local handicap charity. And while on the board, he does what he does best, and he forges some more letters. Now, these letters went from the executive director to the mayor, and then also from the mayor to the director. Can you guess what his letters were about? Do you have any guess?
No.
He names himself as Man of the Year.
Oh my God. He didn't think somebody would be suspicious of that?
He did not. So
What an idiot.
using the fact that he forged these letters from the mayor to the director saying, oh, this guy John's great, he's mayor, or he's Man of the Year, and vice versa, he's named Man of the Year and decides to throw himself a luncheon
Naturally.
to honor his award. I'm sorry. He's 33 years old. He's 33 years old.
The balls on this guy.
Right? Like, hence the name of this episode, which is 100% Man of the Year. Just saying. But because he was the winner, and I use winner loosely here, of Man of the Year, it ended up being in the newspaper, and the people that he forged the documents back and forth to realize, I never wrote a letter to you saying he was Man of the Year, and vice versa. So they exposed him as a fraud. And meanwhile, this Man of the Year, mind you, is literally, his wife is covered in bruises because he's beating the crap out of her. He's starving his 2 dogs and his horses, and just, he's not a good guy, but he's Man of the Year. Eventually, our Man of the Year finishes his probation in 1979. I don't know how a career criminal finish his probation when he's been arrested literally every year since put on probation. But he finishes probation and he gets a stamp of approval from his probation officer saying that he did a great job.
So was the guy blind?
Apparently so.
Incompetence all the way around in this one.
The same year that he was awarded Man of the Year and off of his probation, he gets a job working at Guy's Food, and he's an employee relations manager. He gets arrested again in 1980 for embezzlement. He embezzled thousands by inventing fake employees, writing them checks, and cashing them.
You know, he is creative. I'll give him that.
He is creative.
That man is always coming up with a new story to run with.
Yeah, he's definitely a scam artist, but he's charged with felony theft for submitting false vouchers and forged checks, and he has to pay back over $41,000 in restitution.
Yeah, and how is he going to do that? He's going to just go somewhere else and create more fake employees.
When it was all said and done, he pled guilty to a Class C felony, which I guess is like the lesser offense of them all, of stealing $6,000 in checks. And starting in May of 1982, so about 6 months later after he was originally arrested, he finally, for the first time in his 37 years of criminal activity,
he gets
does his first stint in jail, but only given 60 days.
He'll learn from that.
So jailbirdie John isn't scared straight by his little 60 days in jail. And as soon as he's released, he creates yet another phony business. This one kind of irritated me on a different level. He convinces a friend, and again, I say friend loosely, to invest $25,000 into this fake business. Now, mind you, the friend thinks it's a real business, and he tells him there's going to be a quick return. I just need you to invest. So this friend gives him all the money he's got, $25,000. And you stop and think, like, kind of get what you get if you're investing in your friend who you know is a criminal. I don't know what extent this guy knew of John's criminal activity, but he gives him this money because he's desperate. Would you like to know why this friend was desperate?
Sure.
He needed the money because his wife was dying and they needed it for her medical care. And he took it. Like, he straight up stole this money from this guy who's using this cash to pay for his wife's medical care as she's dying. Like, it puts it on a whole new level of messed up.
Yeah.
Anyway, so at this point, that brings us to the summer of the same year, 1982. He's 38 years old, and he starts, and he's working on this consulting company that he created, that he's just stole this money from. It's called Equa Plus. He sexually propositions many of his neighbors, or their wives, or however you want to word it. And he gets into a physical fight with one of the husbands because the wife goes and is like, hey, this guy's kind of a creep. This is what he just propositioned me with. And then John meets this guy named Irv Blattner, Blattner, and they become partners in crime. They start a sister company to this Equa Plus called Equa 2. Yeah, creative.
I shouldn't have given him credit earlier.
So,
well, what should we call it?
So we're going to put a pin in Irv and John's shenanigans for a second, because I'm trying to keep it in chronological order. So that was in the fall of 1982. John's 38 years old. Now go to 1983. Remember I said John was one of 5 kids?
Mm-hmm.
He has a brother named Donald. Now, Donald Robinson is married to a woman named Helen. Don and Helen wanted so badly to be parents. But they just could not conceive. And I guess back in the 80s, IVF was just not a thing. That was an option for a lot of people. So they were trying to adopt. They were having no luck. John claimed that he had connections with an adoption agency, and he would see what he could do about helping them find a baby to adopt. So that was in 1983. Okay. Just keep that little nugget in the back of your mind. Now let's go
No,
back to
naturally, no one questions this. He's such an honest man.
he's man of the year. Come on now.
Valid.
So in 1984, John and Irv are working on this Equa Plus and Equa 2. Irv leads John to a woman who wants a divorce. Okay. And John pretends that he's an attorney and promises to give her a divorce, but she has to fork over $200 and her car. So she gives it to him. They take her stuff. They leave. Obviously, she never gets her divorce. Great, men. Great, great. So now our career criminal has a partner. In the summer of same year, 1984, John meets a 19-year-old Paula Godfrey. She is hired to work as a sales rep for his fake company that she does not know is a fake company. Paul is absolutely thrilled when she learns that she's got the job. She tells her family and friends that John's sending her away for training in this new venture for her life. Paula's never heard from again. Nobody ever hears from her. Her parents call police and file a missing persons report. Because John's the last person to have seen her or talked to her, police questioned him, who denied knowing where she was. About 2 weeks later, Paula's parents receive a typed letter that said it was from Paula, saying that she was fine and that she no longer wanted anything to do with her family. And then it was signed with her signature. So Paula's parents take this letter to the police and they're like, oh, well, shit, she's a grown-ass adult.
Yeah, she can do
You
what
said
she
it.
wants.
Yeah, you said this is in fact her signature. So case closed. She just wants nothing to do with you guys. Can't help you. So they close this missing persons case.
It's shitty.
Mind you, to this day, there is no trace of 19-year-old Paula Godfrey. She has never been found or heard from again.
That poor family.
Right? 1984. That's a long time. So John rents a duplex under the name of Equa 2 and turns it into a brothel. He hires Linda Stevens Jones to run it and find other girls to basically pimp out. The brothel specialized in S&M sex, so we're slowly introducing some violence into this man's criminal activity, I guess is a nice way to put it. Robinson at this time also became the leading member of a secret sex cult called International Council of Masters, and he named himself
Man of the Year.
close slave master. So he was apparently in charge of bringing victims to their meetings for beatings, torture, and rape.
Weird
Man of the
group
Year.
to be involved in.
And then on January 10th, 1985, John Robinson uses the alias John Osborne when he meets 19-year-old Lisa Stacy. She was at a women's shelter in Kansas City, Missouri. Lisa was a single mother. She had a 4-month-old baby girl named Tiffany. Now, a little brief history on Lisa. She got pregnant with her boyfriend, Carl. As soon as Carl found out Lisa was pregnant, they decided to get married. They got into a huge fight, and Lisa takes off around Christmas 1984 and takes her baby Tiffany with her. That's according to Karen Moore, and that was Lisa's aunt. And then, mind you, good old man of the year, around Christmas 1984, so the same time Lisa took off, John claimed to have created an organization called Kansas City Outreach Program. And this program was supposed to be to help women and single mothers that were down on their luck. He went around to different hospitals and shelters and even reached out to different social workers to let them know about this program that he started. Karen Gladys was a former social worker. She said she was told the program was for young, pregnant, or for young pregnant women or women with infants to help them get on their feet. So just, he was on a hunt for young women. He's got his brothel. He's looking for people to put there. He's got his sex cult. He's a real winner. And then John ends up meeting Lisa. So John promises Lisa a job in Chicago that comes with an apartment and daycare. Lisa, all she had to do was sign a few blank papers.
Ooh.
Yeah. Lisa is never heard from again. No one ever sees her baby. Completely gone. They just vanish off the face of the earth. A few days later, John calls his brother, Don, and says, "Hey, bro, if you give me $5,500 for legal fees, I have a connection and I have a 4-month-old baby girl for you to adopt." So Donald is like, "Well, what about the mom?" And John says the mother committed suicide.
Just trying to think of the logistics on that. How do you just have a baby that pops up?
So Donald and Helen are super excited because they're blinded by the fact that they're just desperate to be parents. And they fork the money over to this wonderful man of the year, $5,500. And they give John the money and he presents them with this baby. It was a little baby girl. He hands them a set of adoption papers that looked 100% legit. He even forged the signatures of a judge and 2 lawyers on these adoption papers. Just, he
at least does his homework.
Right? Like, he's very thorough. If he would have put this much effort into
something legitimate.
Yeah, he would have been insanely successful. Like, he's got a real drive, just not to do anything good. But in March 1985, he's now 42 years old. Irv, his little partner in crime, I guess starts getting a little squirmy. I guess murder is kind of out of his realm of comfort. And he cooperates with Secret Service to sign a statement implicating John in a position of a number of illegal activities to get him arrested under his probation violations. So at this point, the Secret Service is kind of on him. I don't know. I thought the Secret Service only kind of worked with the president, not to make myself sound like an ignorant fool. I didn't know they looked into stuff like this, but I guess I don't know. Anywho, so the Secret Service ended up arresting John at his probation officer's office. A month later, he's out at that point, but he meets a woman named Teresa Williams. Now, this is April 1985. He was just arrested in March of 1985. So literally a month later, he meets Teresa Williams and lets her move into his brothel and becomes his personal prostitute. He then tries to get her to help him frame Irv for her own murder.
What?
Yeah. Which, of course, he claims that they're going to fake this murder. So FBI...
Although I don't know if I'm going to believe it's going to be fake.
I don't know if somebody starts talking about me framing somebody for my murder that I'm going to stick around.
You're like, yes, for them to that's even say. Fantastic idea. Why don't while I'm at it, get a life insurance policy for your sole benefit?
Right.
Let's do that too. Why not?
Yeah. I'm going to have some like Roadrunner moves and there's going to be a cloud of dust behind me. But FBI agents at that point had been keeping an eye on John and got Teresa to move to a safe house before John could take her to the Bahamas like he claimed he was going to do. So for anybody that's slow, he was planning to kill her.
Thanks, Sandra.
Hey, you'd be surprised.
I know I haven't had my coffee today, but it's a bit harsh.
So, but you'd be surprised how many articles specifically stated, oh, by the way, he intended to kill her. And it was like, well, no shit. But I figured since all the articles pointed out, I might as well too. But anywho, that was in April of 1985. Now we're in July of 1985. He hires his own private detective to go hunt down this chick, Teresa. And the FBI has to move her again to a different city to keep her safe. Like you said earlier, the balls on this guy, like, you know, the FBI is hiding her from you, and you're going to hire a PI to try to track her down while she's under the protection of the FBI. Like, that is insane.
He's got no quit in him, but he also has nothing, a shred of integrity.
That's true. So that was July. Now we're in August 21st, 1985. We're getting close to your birthday now. John Robinson's probation is revoked, and he's sentenced to 7 years in Missouri Department of Corrections. Now, I guess that has to do with the Irv cooperating with the FBI or Secret Service to bring him in. So his probation's revoked. He's sentenced to 7 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections. But luckily, I've never seen in my life before, he appeals and wins and never has to serve a day in jail. He then made the cover of a national magazine
for Man of the Year.
No, called Farm and Journal. The editors were unaware of his criminal record at the time. Again, these people should be fired for not doing their jobs. But the article was promoting people to invest in his company called Equi2. Can I remind you that this is also the same company that's running his brothel? Two ranchers read this article and think, yeah, this guy's great. Let's invest $10,000 a piece. And they lost their $20,000. I would totally sue that magazine, by the way, because they only heard of him and invested in him because this article was like, hey, this guy's great. Yeah. I just, like, it blows my mind. That was August 21st, 1985. Now we're at June 1987. 27-year-old single mother, Catherine Clampett. She left her child with her parents in Wichita Falls, Texas, to move to Kansas City, Missouri, in search of a job. Unfortunately for Catherine, she meets John. He promised Catherine a job with tons of travel and a bonus of a brand new wardrobe. Any guess on what happens to her?
She dies.
She goes missing, and she's never been seen or heard from again. And to this day, she's still a missing person, and her case is still open.
I would kind of like to know where he was putting bodies.
We'll get there. But just so you know that as of today, she's still a missing person. Like, I looked it up, and I was trying to find if somebody found her remains, but if they did, it hasn't been connected to her, which is kind of crazy. So from 1987 to 1991, John was in jail for multiple fraud convictions in Kansas, and then his dad dies. So in 1987, he goes to jail. 1989, when he's 46 years old, while he's in jail, his dad dies. He then suffers a series of strokes that permanently gave him neurological damage on the right side of his face, was partially paralyzed, and he had like a slack look on the side of his face. So I guess maybe the stress of his dad dying, which blows my mind because his dad, they had nothing good to say about his dad. Granted, he wasn't as bad as his abusive mother, but just kind of crazy. So he's in jail in Kansas till 1991. And then in 1991, at the end of his sentence in Kansas, he's transferred to Missouri, and he goes to jail for fraud charges and parole violations until 1993. You would think after all this time in jail, he might decide that, you know, his criminal life isn't for him. His dad's passed away. He's had this stroke, multiple strokes. While he's in jail in Western Missouri Correctional Facility, he meets a prison librarian named Beverly Bonner. She's 49 years old. She is married. As soon as John is released from the prison that Beverly was employed at, she decides to leave her husband, who, by the way, was the prison doctor, and runs off with John.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, not for the same reason, but I would want to meet him because how is he able to pull the wool over everybody's eyes so easily? Like, talk about a slick con artist.
Right? I mean, blows my mind. Like, absolutely blows my
Or
mind.
maybe he's got a choking hazard.
Maybe.
I meant a penis.
Yes, I don't know about his choking hazard or lack thereof. I think he's just a smooth talker. But can I just say, ladies, all the ladies out there and gentlemen, whoever, can we make better choices, please? Like,
The
your
grass isn't
husband's a
greener.
like your husband's a doctor. Not saying that doctors walk on the sun, but or
What?
walk on water. Walk on water. Leave me alone. My brain is so fried today. What the heck? So
Please,
shut up.
please explain to me the benefits of walking on the sun. You better have some hella SPF, like 50,000, and some burn
Oh shit.
ointment.
Okay. So anywho, like her husband is a prison doctor. She's the librarian, and she leaves him for somebody that was an inmate. Like, just I don't feel like that's a good life choice. Anyway, so Beverly packs up all her crap and moves out to Kansas City to be with John. Oh, by the way, John is still married to Nancy with their 4 kids. John sets up a P.O. box for Beverly's alimony checks to be delivered to. And as soon as the P.O. box is set up, get a couple letters that are signed. They never see or hear from her again. But for several years after she kind of vanishes, Beverly's mom continues to forward those alimony checks to the P.O. box that John had set up for her. And they're still cashed every single month by John. So, yeah, I'm sorry, but if my kid goes missing, I realize she's not really a kid. She's 49, but I wouldn't keep sending a check I'd be like, no, bitch, call me. What is wrong with you? Anyway, Beverly's ex-husband reaches out to John and demands to know where Beverly is. And John tells him that she moved to Australia. Also, same time, 1994, John discovers the internet. So our career criminal now has gone
From man of the year to founder of the internet.
Yep, couldn't have said that better myself. More specifically, John discovers chat rooms, and he names himself the Slave Master. He trolled the internet in search of women interested in being submissive to him during sex. He meets Sheila Faith online. She's also a single mother. Sheila's daughter is wheelchair bound. She's 15 years old, and her name is Debbie Faith. Debbie suffers from spina bifida, and John convinces Sheila to move to Kansas. He tells her that he's a wealthy businessman and a philanthropist, and he promises to help pay Debbie's medical expenses and promises Sheila a great job. So Sheila, like the many women before her, does not seem to remember that if it's too good to be true, it usually is. She packs up all of hers and Debbie's belongings, and they move to Kansas City from Fullerton, California, and the mother and daughter immediately disappear. John, however, cashes Sheila's pension checks, which, by the way, are being delivered to the same P.O. box as Beverly's alimony checks. You want to take a wild guess as to how long he gets away with cashing those checks for before anybody raises a red flag?
Mm-hmm.
No guess?
No.
7 years. For 7 years, he's cashing these women's these checks, and nobody says anything. So in December 1950 or 1995,
this whole case is like a house of cards of incompetence.
It really is. And it's sad because now John has escalated to murdering people or making them just up and disappear.
He's a magician too. Man of the year, founder of the internet, magician.
That might be our new title for this one. Anywho, so he stole.
I was just thinking, sorry, like delayed reaction to that. I was actually just picturing it in my head, all the commas.
Yeah, well, I might name it that one. I'm on the fence. I'll let you know what I decide. So he's 52 years old at this point. It's 1995, December. He's stolen so much money from Beverly's alimony checks and Faith's Social Security. He was able to put $95,000 down for a house for his son and new grandchildren in Florida. So his son moves to Florida, if you didn't catch that one. John is known as the dirty old man in his own neighborhood because he keeps making sexual advances to several of his female neighbors. And he would even creep around the trailer park, slowly driving by these women's trailers in a golf cart
He
when
was
he knew their
looking for a
husbands were
titty
gone.
shot.
Well, that's some creepy shit. Like seriously, if your neighbor Claire was out there strolling back and forth past your house because he knew Dave was at work, that's some creepy, weird stuff, you know? Ugh.
Yeah.
In 1996, John and his wife moved into a brand new mobile. Him and his wife moved into a new mobile home in Santa Barbara Estates, and he spent a lot of time in front of 5 computers searching BDSM. And for those that live under a rock, BDSM, bondage, discipline, and sadomasochism on the
5
internet.
computers, rewind, 5 computers? How many monitors did he need that shit pulled up on?
I have no idea. The guy's a freaking pervert. Like, oh my gosh. Like, and computers were cheap back in the 90s because it was fairly new having your own computer in your house. And he's got 5 of them. And he's searching BDSM websites looking for victims.
No, you know what? I understand what it is now. Do you remember when the internet first came out, how long it would take to download a picture, let alone a video?
That's true. But he was in
So he
chat.
needed 5 computers because he would click on one thing, move to the next one, and by the time he got to the 5th computer, the first one loaded.
Oh, gotta love broadband. And
You think he had it set up in a circle so he could just swivel his chair while he beat his meat?
maybe.
It seems more efficient way to do things. That's all
Well,
I'm
he's
saying.
currently in jail. You can always write to him.
I will not.
So in 1997, our wonderful man of the year, our magician, our practically a
Although
doctor.
I am a little bit slow today because I was just thinking, you think if you titled a letter to him, Man of the Year, prisoner number, whatever, that he'd still get it? They'd be like, the hell is this shit?
Probably. I would assume he'd get it. As long as you've got his inmate number on there, I don't see why not.
Again, not doing it. But I just laugh at the
So,
Man of the Year, founder of the internet. I already forgot his third name. Oh, magician.
yeah, magician. John meets a Polish immigrant named Isabel Lewicka online. She's 21. She's enrolled in a community college and living in Indiana.
Oh no.
She I feel like nothing good comes out of Indiana
No.
on the cases that we do. Just she meets John in a BDSM website or chat room, and in 1999, so she kind of held off for 2 years, played hard to get, I guess. He tells Isabella that he will marry her and gives her a sex slave contract, which she accepts, drops out of school, and moves to Kansas City. He buys Isabella an engagement ring. They go to the county registrar and they get a marriage license, which never gets picked up. However, just in case you forgot, he is still married to Nancy.
How did he get a marriage? Oh, they never picked it up. But how
Yeah.
did it even get approved?
I don't think it got approved, which is why it probably never got picked up. But they went and they filled it out. And Isabella thought that she was married, and she calls her parents and tells them she's now married. She
Sh
never gave them her husband's name, which that seems strange to me.
she's an idiot. Like, how does she think she's married because she
Yeah.
filled out an application?
Uh-huh.
Although I keep forgetting he's a really good con man, exceptional con man,
And he put a ring on it. So that's it. Done.
but he forgot to give her his name.
No, she forgot to give her
No,
parents his name.
I know.
But you,
I'm married. I don't know what his name is.
oh gosh. She signs, by the way, a 115-page slave contract.
That's some serious reading. I hope it was a big font. And
That's a
that's not
hard
like
no for
code
me,
for a
people.
dick, but like I'm hoping the font to those 150 pages was large.
It's 115, not 150. Not that
No.
that matters.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I have flashbacks of that Friends episode of Ross. It's 26.
Was
This
it
is a
front and back?
yeah. Oh, I don't know. I
I,
doubt it. If it's typed,
I
I would
wasn't
hope.
asking you about friends.
I don't know. Anyway, so this slave contract gave John complete control over everything, including her bank accounts. I don't know how that would hold up in a court or even at the bank. Sometime in the summer of 1999, Isabella, like the others before her, disappeared. John tells his web designer employee for, that wonderful fake business he's running and has people investing money into, that Isabella was caught smoking weed and she was deported. Answer for everybody, and they just accepted it, and that was that. Around the same time, summer of 99, John meets an LPN, a licensed practical nurse. Her name is Suzette Troughton. She's 27 years old. Suzette moves from Michigan to Kansas with the promise of traveling the world with John as his submissive sex slave. Suzette's parents receive, like Paula's, several typed letters that are signed by their daughter, just like Paula Godfrey's. The letters were claiming that Suzette was traveling abroad with John. However, all of the letters were postmarked from Kansas City. While the letters are claiming they're overseas traveling, they're all postmarked from Kansas City. Suzette's mother reported the letters were not written by her daughter and they were uncharacteristically mistake free. And later in interviews, Suzette's mother said Suzette had really poor grammar. And for the letters to be mistake free, that was a big red flag.
That is so sad. I don't want to be identified by my poor spelling.
Right.
Like, oh no, she won't that smart. She just misspelled this word absolutely.
Eventually, John tells Suzette's mother that Suzette stole from him, stole cash, and ran off with another man that they were acquaintances with. By late 1999, John had attracted the attention of both Kansas and Missouri authorities. And for a while after Suzette disappeared, he used Suzette's email to keep in touch with some of her friends to keep up the guise that she was still alive.
I don't know.
We're going to call her Lori. And I'm sorry.
I don't even know if lore is a name.
I don't know. Well, we're just going to call this person Lori. And they find these emails to be strange. So, John, by the way, at this time is now going by J.R. Turner. He's changed his name for Suzette's group of friends. And he also started an online relationship with a woman named Vicky. So, Vicky was an unemployed psychiatrist. Authorities were 100% onto John and all of these disappearing women. Like they're starting to finally wake up and like communicate with each other and be like, hey, we might want to keep an eye on this guy because women seem to just vanish when he's around. John is none the wiser. He has no idea that they're onto him. He wires money to Vicky and says, hey, let's meet up at this motel in Overland Park. And the detectives rent the room next door to the room that John and Vicky meet up in. And they stand by and listen as John forces Vicky into rougher sex than she intended. Authorities had no idea what was going on and what John was doing to Vicky, but there are pictures. These are the pictures I sent you the other day. It's not funny, Claire. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to edit that one out. I feel like I have to because it's not funny.
Sorry. I was more or less laughing, and more than less, I guess. Because you send me some weird shit pretty regularly. So that was more the laughter, not the whole spread eagle with a makeshift poles, keeping our legs spread laughter.
I might not edit this out because you literally just described everything. But anywho, so John had tied up Vicky, like Claire just described, and slapped her around and beat on her.
Did she forget the safe word?
I don't think they had one because she didn't intend to have sex with him like that.
Huh.
I think she was expecting like a little bit of a hair tug and maybe a slap on the ass cheek while,
Oh, this was not the 115 pager.
No, she's already gone. We have no
Well, I
idea
don't know
what's
what the
happened to
point of
her.
having her sign that was if he was just going to have her abracadabra.
I don't know. I'm guessing maybe he got too rough with her and she wanted to leave, so he decided to kill her instead.
Well, he made her leave.
It's not funny, Claire.
I did not laugh. She just didn't specify how she wanted to leave, so he had her go.
Magician John. So he also took photos, obviously, since I sent them to Claire, of Vicky against her will. He sodomized her, raped her, and thus equals sexual battery. But this entire time that he's doing this, the police have John on their radar and they're listening.
Perverts.
Right. But anyway, so John leaves Vicky stranded with no money. I couldn't find if he leaves her tied up, but it says that he left her stranded in the hotel and he returns several days later where he beats on her some more before he unties her and he orders Vicky to return to Texas, but keeps her 500 to 700, depending on the article you read, worth of S&M toys and props. That's a lot of money on sex toys.
Well, I don't know, they're pretty pricey. So I hear.
All right, Claire.
No, you know what? I snorted in one of these other ones, and you know what pisses me off out of that? Dave, when he was listening to it with me in the car, goes, "Your sister snorts like your mom," when she laughs. I was like, that was.
Oh, shit, I love it. So Vicky calls police once she's freed and tells police, everything that happened and files a report of the abuse and the stolen sex toys and all of that. But in the meantime, John meets a woman named Jenna, who's an unemployed accountant, also from Texas. She also, like Vicky, traveled to Kansas City, ready to begin her work as John Robinson's executive assistant for his business. He puts her up in the same hotel that he sodomized and robbed and raped Vicky and left her there. Oh, that's his go-to place. When he returns, he savagely beat her for not assuming a position that he demanded of her naked in the corner when he entered the room. Well, apparently Jenna did not do that, so he beat the living crap out of her.
Maybe she thought he was kidding.
Maybe. And then he rapes her, and he takes pictures of her and all her bruises after he beats her. And following the same pattern as Vicky, he gives Jenna $100 and told her to go home and ordered her to put all of her possessions into one of his storage units. She follows his order. He sends her home, tells her to come back. When she comes back, first of all, there's not a chance in hell that I would come back after you just beat the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
Raped me, sodomized me, took my pictures against my will, and then send me home, and then tells me to come back. I'm not coming back. But she returns to Kansas, and John continues to be too rough and abandons her in the motel, just like with Vicky. And she was scared for her life, so she reaches out and contacts police eventually. That, by the way, was in 2000. So police are still kind of keeping an eye on John, but I don't know why they've yet to move on him. I guess none of it was enough. And because it was back to back, Vicky and Jenna, um, they now have two women who filed complaints of the sexual abuse and stealing of the sex toys. And they suspect him for all these other women going missing. And while they're checking him out further, they learn he's in the process of convincing another single mother to bring her young daughter with her to Kansas City to become his sex slave. So police are like, whoa, 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 this isn't going to work. These women are disappearing. Their daughters are disappearing. We need to figure out what the hell's going on. So on June 2nd, 2000, John is 56 years old. Police come into his home with search warrants, arrest him, and they search his mobile home and his ranch that he has that's 30 miles away. At his ranch in La Signa, police use a cadaver dog who find the bodies of Suzette Trouten and Isabella Lewicka. He had stuffed their bodies into a 55-gallon chemical drum where they were badly decomposing. Then in Raymore, Missouri, police also had were searching his property because they had those search warrants. And they searched John's storage unit where they found he had 2 units. And there were also 55-gallon drums with the bodies of Sheila and Debbie Faith, her handicapped 15-year-old daughter, and also of 49-year-old prison librarian Beverly Bonner. So they've now found 5 of these women dead and stuffed into 55-gallon drums. On June 21st, 2000, a former acquaintance of John's reaches out and says that this cult that John was involved in, the bondage, rape, and torture cult, and according to this informant, John's job was to recruit women, and these women would then be raped and tortured. And a witness. Now, my mind is blown on what I'm about to tell you because I just don't get it. But this witness, who's still unnamed, I guess for their own safety, saw John participate in 3 Kansas City area rituals where supposedly no one was killed, but the women were tortured extensively, and sometimes they even carved up their face and abdomen of the victims and cut off certain body parts.
The hell?
How is it that if you're chopping off body parts, like, but no deaths, and nobody's coming forward as a victim, like, I'm highly suspicious on this whole no deaths thing.
Yeah.
But authorities confirmed that Sheila Faith was one of the victims found in the Missouri storage locker, but they refused to say whether or not it was the other one was of her daughter, 15-year-old Debbie. But they did confirm that all of these women suffered from blunt force trauma to their heads. And to get into the more disgusting side of things, he beat these women to death with a hammer.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a quick death. It was he bludgeoned them to death. He's disgusting. So on February 5th, 2001, John's charges, which at this point included 2 capital murder charges for Suzette and Isabella's murders, 2 counts of fraud, 54 forgery charges, aggravated kidnapping of Suzette, and all of the other charges.
In a pear tree.
The court ruled that John would stand trial for the 7 felony charges, including 3 capital murder charges, by March 2nd. So his charges are slowly getting, like, he went from 2 charges of capital murder to 7 felony charges, and 3 of them are murder charges. The trial is the longest criminal case in Kansas history. It took 6 weeks. Eventually, John pleads guilty to killing Beverly Bonner, Paula Godfrey, Debbie and Sheila Faith, and Catherine Clampett. In January 2003, a judge, John Anderson III, sentenced John Edward Robinson to death. So he got 2 death penalties and handed down a life sentence for Lisa Stacy's killing. Like, they really wanted him dead. Which,
Please tell me it wasn't commuted.
so no, it was not. He's currently 72 years old and on death row. But get this. So remember good old Nancy Jo Lynch, his bride from back in the 60s? He stayed married to her this whole time. Nancy claimed she knew of John's affairs and even knew of his relationship with Isabella. And she said she just thought he was going to divorce her for the younger mistress. And even after he was arrested for all these rapes and murders and kidnapping, Nancy confessed that she still loved him. Like, he beat her. I'm sorry. My love has conditions. Sorry, Jason. My love is conditional. If I find out you're cheating on me, raping women, murdering women, any of that, my love will cease to exist for you.
Unless she's like banking on he's such a sweet talker, he might end up out of prison by some weird way he escapes. So she's going to be like, no, no, I love him, still committed to him. And then she's like looking over her shoulder. Like,
She said that the reason she didn't leave him, she thought about leaving him, but the reason she didn't is because she did not want to disappoint her granddaughter.
huh?
Uh-huh. That was her and that she still loved him. That was her reasoning for not leaving him. I'm sorry, again, you're not going to beat on me, cheat on me, rape and kill other people. Like, no. Have a line. But then again, I feel like at the same time, she might be in need of some serious therapy because this woman was married to him for like, I think it was 44 years before she finally divorced him in 2005. And that's a lot of abuse that she went through. And I feel like her self-esteem was probably very, very low, you know?
Yeah.
But anywho, so while that's kind of it on him, I had to do some more research and kind of backtrack because I was really curious about this baby that he sold to his brother. Like, what the hell?
Did
So,
they keep it?
yeah.
Like, I mean, I imagine it was several years later before anyone found out. It's one of those, would they take her?
So the thing is he presented what looked like legitimate adoption papers to his brother and his sister-in-law. And so they had no reason to suspect him of forging these documents because, as far as they knew, all of his crimes were like embezzlement. And not to make it sound lesser of like a crime, because I'm sure the people he was stealing from did not appreciate it, but I guess they didn't know of his kidnapping and murder hobbies that he had going on, his homicide hobbies. But the FBI reached out to Donald and his wife Helen and said, "Hey, just so you know, your brother was the last one to interact with this chick, Lisa, and she had a 4-month-old baby. And 2 days after Lisa was reported missing, John gave you guys a baby that's the exact same age as the one that went missing. We think this might be what's going on." So Donald and his wife were absolutely horrified. And, um, they later discovered that this baby he did steal, and it was baby Tiffany. It was Lisa's baby. And they named her Heather. So baby Tiffany is now Heather. And she was growing up with her mother's killer as her uncle.
Ugh.
Yeah. So Tiffany, or Heather, whatever you want to call her, was 15, about to be 16 when she learned that her adoptive uncle had murdered her mother and sold her to her now parents. But I gotta say, like, that's horrible. But at least Donald and Helen were honest with her and she knew she was adopted. You know what I mean? Because I couldn't imagine being 15 and finding out not only was I adopted, but my uncle murdered my mother, stole me, and sold me to my parents. Like that would be that's that's a lot to absorb,
Yeah.
you know? But at least she knew she was adopted, the very least. DNA tests have since confirmed that Heather is in fact the missing baby, Tiffany, and the daughter of Lisa and of Lisa's husband, Carl Stacy. So a lawyer for Carl, because Carl's still alive, has reached out to try to broker a meeting between the traumatized teen and her biological father. However, nobody really knows what to do because the police do not suspect that Donald or his wife knew of how John came to acquire this little baby. They honestly believed that he somehow decided to find this abandoned baby whose mother supposedly committed suicide, and they didn't want to take her from the only parent she's known, but yet she has family out there because Lisa's sister, her parents, her biological father, like there's so many people that have been looking for this little girl, and she's busy growing up with.
At least she was growing up where she was loved rather than like an awful life.
Yeah. So Lisa Stacy's sister-in-law, so Carl, Lisa's husband, or yeah, um, his sister still calls the baby, who's now a teenager, Tiffany, even though Tiffany grew up under a different name. She's said to had written two long letters, one on Halloween with flowers, and one
It's
on
a weird time to send that shit.
right. I thought the same thing. I was like, on Halloween. And one on the teen's 16th birthday with a candle back in 2000. But Tiffany or Heather, whatever you want to call her, never responded to her because I feel like that's a lot.
Yeah.
15, 16 years old, you're already going through so much mentally, just being a normal teenager, but to find out you're adopted, I feel
Yeah,
like that
there's
puts
all
some
this
extra
weird
pressure.
drama.
And then you've got, well, your uncle's going to jail for all this crap. And then you top it off with finding out that not only did your uncle murder your mom and kidnap you, like that's so
Yeah.
much to try to process. Donald and Helen, I give them mad props because they gave the biological family pictures of Tiffany, and like nobody's trying to push this girl. Like they want her to process all this information, and if she wants to forge a relationship with her biological family, everybody's supportive of that, but it's a lot. But they give pictures of Tiffany from over the years as she was growing up to the biological family. There is an interview with 2020 back on October 5th, 2019. And the teenager, who at that point was an adult, um, is going by the name Heather Tiffany Robinson. So I guess her middle name is her birth name. So Heather Tiffany said that she was always uncomfortable or felt uneasy around her Uncle John. There was like always something about him that just kind of felt wrong or off. Some good instincts.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about how in 2007 she sued her uncle and won a judgment preventing John Edward Robinson from profiting from any of the book sales or film rights having to do with his crimes. And the circuit court judge, Thomas Clark of Jackson County, awarded Heather Tiffany a $5 billion judgment against John.
Yeah, but where's that going to come from?
So I guess like any movie rights or book deals that he's
Oh,
signed.
it's going to come out of.
Yeah. So because he's serving life in prison until he gets the death penalty. So any profit he's going to try to make off of his crimes is going to go to her. So more power to him.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead, you piece of garbage. But Judge Clark is reported to have said that John's failure to come clean and give Heather Tiffany and the Stacy family any sort of closure in the case of the missing Lisa Stacy, because um yeah, to give any closure in the case, because he was motivated by the potential of monetary gain by selling his story. Lisa's remains are still unknown. Like, he will not tell anybody where her body is. So, told you that was one heck of a case. Like, there's just so much. Like, he is officially a career criminal.
Yeah.
Any
He's the
thoughts?
man of the year.
He's a magician.
So he's gonna have his death coming up soon, unless they're just dragging it out more so that
So
any money.
I had to stop researching because, as you can see, this case is almost an hour and a half long. And I saw that he is currently appealing his sentence because he's saying that his original attorney failed to do their job correctly. So he's trying to get the whole thing overturned. And from what I saw, I think it's due to go to court in April. So this month.
Huh.
Yeah. So he's trying to get rid of the whole thing and get out of jail, which I
So
pray to God.
you're gonna have to re-say that one because this one's not gonna air in April.
Well, but we're recording it in April, so
But it's
still.
supposed to be the allure of they don't know that they're not live. The they.
Do we have listeners at this point? By the
Well,
time this
we
episode
might have
airs.
then. We might. You don't know. I would hope so.
I really hope so too. Hopefully
Because
we
who's
have
gonna wear our
consistent listeners.
t-shirts?
I know, right? Are we gonna have t-shirts available at this point? We've got some really cool t-shirts for you guys. Oh god.
Which, by the way, future reference, don't ask me questions. I blank when it's like the spotlight, and I was like, every word that I ever know in my life just went boop. And then
Yeah, I was pretty
the
surprised. I was like,
longer it ticked by, I was like, say something, anything.
I gave you that moment of being in school and having the teacher call on you where you're just like,
Uh,
oh crap, I can't read. Did you
You
ever
did
have
it
that in
like
school?
5 times. I was like, "Stop fucking asking me. This isn't an interview.
I
Tell the
think it
fucking
was
story, lady.
I
I'm
was
just
trying
here
to get you
for, like,
involved.
comments." I was like, "Good day,
Don't worry. I will edit all those long pauses. Just know that Claire went completely stupefied on some of them.
I was like,
That's okay. Did you ever have that in school though? Like when the teacher would call on you to like read aloud, you just all of a sudden could no longer read. It's like,
Yeah, then the sweating, the slobbering, the, like, I can't even say the words because I'm, like, foaming like a Saint Bernard over here. Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.